Blackwater Ben by William Durbin, Chapter 29. The following morning, when it came time to deliver breakfast, Ben dreaded facing Charlie. He turned to Nevers and said, "Would you like to take a turn at bringing—" "Stop right there," Nevers interrupted him. On his way to Charlie's, Ben watched a raven flying over the bunkhouse, holding a branch in her claws. That meant she was ready to build her nest. And despite the cold, spring would be coming soon. Ben thought about rapping on the door and leaving Charlie's tray on the steps, but he'd have to face him sooner than later. When Ben knocked on the door, his knuckles hurt from the cold, and he wished he had worn choppers. "Come in," Charlie said. Ben stepped inside, and avoiding Charlie's eyes, set the tray on the table. Charlie saved him by asking, "Is it still a little nippy?" "It's 29 below by my—" Ben stopped. "I'm not supposed to tell anyone. I've been reading the push's thermometer." "We can keep it our secret," Charlie said. "The exact temperature doesn't matter to me. I can gauge how much set these misery whips need by eyeing the frost on the window pane." "Charlie," Ben began, "I'm sorry for spouting off like I did. There's no need to apologize, Squire. I know you've told me all about my mother. I just feel like a big chunk of my life is missing. I never even knew what she looked like until I saw your photograph." "You don't have a picture of your own mom?" Charlie asked. "Pa's only photograph is all blurry and water-stained. It's natural for you to grab onto every little fragment, but I shouldn't have yelled at you. I had it coming. I've been thinking about what Lucinda would have thought of a fellow who ran off and hid in the woods like I have. Remember how your mother thought that Thoreau made the proper choice in leaving Walden Pond?" Charlie paused and looked at the window again. "You're right to say that I've put a whole lot more time in the woods than Thoreau ever did." "So what'll you do?" Ben asked. "For now I'm going to eat some breakfast and file some more misery whips. And after that, there'll be lots more saw blades and breakfasts coming my way." The next day, Ben and Nevers decided to play their trick during breakfast. Nevers distracted Pa by asking, "How do you know the right amount of starter for those sourdough flapjacks of yours?" While Pa was explaining the finer points of his sweat pad recipe, Ben poured the castor oil into the beans. He had planned to stop about half a bottle, but since Pa was so busy with flapjack lecture, he decided to empty the whole bottle. When the fellows sat down to eat, Ben was worried that they might notice the funny taste to their beans. Though a few of the Jacks frowned, they dug right in and cleaned their plates as usual. Meanwhile, Nevers slipped out the back door. "What's that pounding outside?" Packy said when we heard Nevers nailing on the outhouse. "Must be woodpeckers," Speed said. As the men were drinking their last cup of swamp water, Ben heard some stomachs rumbling. Then, as the mixture took effect, a few of the Jacks started to shift nervously on their benches. "Would you fellows like to add a little more flavor to your beans?" Ben asked, holding up the empty castor oil bottle. Packy shouted something in French and jumped up and ran at the door with dozens of fellows trailing behind. Ben could tell Packy reached the outhouse door because he yelled again, twice as loud. Pa walked outside to see what was going on. Nevers came back looking pale. "Do you suppose they're going to kill us? Is it that bad?" Ben asked. There must have been 20 fellows at the edge of the woods with their pants dropped. What seemed like a long while later, Packy dragged himself back to the door of the cook shack. Pa was with him. Ben was glad to see that Packy didn't have an axe in his hand. "The boys have been talking," said the Frenchman. The Frenchman started. "They all thought that you'd crossed the line with that little stunt, but then I reminded them that they'd crossed it first with the dead body trick." "They ain't mad, then?" "Oh, they're plenty mad, but they figure things are even now. Pa was not so kind. Don't never forget you got lucky this time, boys, and if you ever mess with my cooking again, I'll send you both down the road." By week's end, the weather had warmed so much that water was dripping off the cook shack roof. After breakfast on Friday, Pa sent Ben to the clerk's shack with an order. "By the look of these icicles, spring can't be far off," Ben said. Maybe not," Wally said. "I've seen it snow up here on the 4th of July. I suppose the thaw means you'll be hiring log drivers soon." "We got to get the timber out of the woods before we can worry about driving it to the mill." Wally turned his attention to his ledger book. Later that same morning, when the Push was finishing his blackjack, Ben said, "Isn't this warm weather nice?" "Are you nuts?" the Push said. "If it ain't too cold in this place, it's too hot. I swear that purgatory would be an improvement after spending a lifetime logging in Minnesota." He banged down his cup and marched out the door. "What's wrong with him?" Ben asked. "The sleds will bust through the ruts if it gets too warm," Pa said. "I can recall losing the roads twice myself," Wendy added. "Both times the company couldn't fill their contract and the crews never even got paid. I figured one bad season wouldn't bust these folks, but you never can tell. When the temperature stayed above freezing for 3 days in a row, the push took Day aside after breakfast. You set to switch to nighttime hauling? I warned the boys to be ready, Day said. The next day, the teamsters napped in the bunkhouse through the afternoon and didn't start running their teams until the rest of the fellows had gone to bed. Day finished his last load just before breakfast, and he beat Packy to the cook shack for the first time all year. How did it go? Pa asked as he hung up the Gabriel horn. The load's holding, Day said, but if the water tank crews can't ice the ruts, we'll lose her pretty quick. The Jacks came in from the woods looking just as tired as Day. Way the water's dripping off the trees, Jigger said. We might be working in a rainstorm. That bunkhouse is beginning to smell like rotten pond scum. What's the use in bothering to hang up our breeches at night when they can't even dry, Packy said, pulling at the seat of his pants before he sat down on the bench. You should sleep in your pants like I do, Swede said. That way your body heat dries them out. Packy was about to answer back, but a look from Pa quieted them both. The swampy smell of wet wool rose from the table. Some of the fellows stunk so bad that Ben figured their clothes must be getting moldy. 2 Jacks quit that day. The push, who normally got angry when men left mid-season, said, I might quit myself if I didn't have to run this soggy outfit.